It's time to have your say. Welcome back to the Q&A, answering your questions in the wrestling community. Ask SCW will begin straight after this. Welcome to a special Q&A today, celebrating 20 years of the master of the 619, one of the greatest luchadors of all time. That's right, the one, the only Mr. Rey Mysterio, celebrating 20 years in WWE this Monday night on Raw. Of course, it will be taking place in Madison Square Garden. A celebration, I think, is what they're doing in WWE as well for this. But yeah, today every question will be based on Rey Mysterio. Some will be based on his WWE tenure, some will be based, of course, he's been in WCW, ECW, New Japan, Lucha Underground, of course, in Mexico as well. So looking forward to diving in all the questions involved on today's show. Going to be talking about some of his greatest feuds, going to be talking about his time in WCW without the mask, and who will turn heel? Will it be Rey Mysterio or Dominik Mysterio? Stay tuned to find out. But without further ado, let's get on with our first question this week, which comes from Tino's Time, asking, what is my favourite Rey Mysterio match of all time? Oh, that's an easy one. Rey Mysterio versus Seth Rollins at Extreme Rules 2020, an eye for an eye. Alright, I'll take it seriously for you. The greatest Rey Mysterio match of all time happens to be against Eddie Guerrero at WCW's Halloween Havoc in 1997. It was Mask versus Cruiserweight Championship, and at that time period as well, the mask being on the line, very rare at that point, was something that we wasn't really used to, luchadors losing the mask. It became quite regular back in WCW as time would go on, and Rey would eventually lose his mask at a later date, but Rey at this point had never lost his mask when he had put it on the line. Eddie Guerrero was just a perfect opponent at that time, Cruiserweight champion as well, and just the storytelling of these two throughout the match and going through such high crazy spots, everything they tried was ahead of its time and just nailed to perfection. You know, when you try something and it just goes perfect. There was a moment where, Rey sort of flips off the top rope to land a sort of DDT on Eddie Guerrero. Absolute perfection, the way that it's put together. Like I say, add all those ingredients in together for Rey Mysterio to then pick up the victory, become Cruiserweight champion, and keep his mask intact. For me, it's his greatest match of all time, a 5-star classic, a match that had no right at that point in WCW to be seen as the main talking point coming out of the event. You had the likes of DDP, Randy Savage, of course, later in the show as well. This was like match 3 on the card, but it was the match that everyone was talking about, and still to this day, if you go back to greatest Rey Mysterio matches, it's the one that comes to a lot of people's lips. Next question comes from Noob and Co. What are Rey Mysterio's best matches outside of WWE, i.e. Lucha Underground, New Japan, etc.? Also have to give a shout out as well to Underground Temple, who asked the same question about Rey Mysterio's best matches in Lucha Underground. Terrific questions to you both. I'm going to be honest with you, with Lucha Underground, the one that always sticks out in my mind is the Ultimate Luchadors match against Prince Puma. Prince Puma was the face of Lucha Underground, was the future face of what would be Luchador Wrestling. Of course, it was Ricochet under the mask. Rey Mysterio, of course, one of the greatest, if not the greatest Luchador of all time. To have that match of those two of that caliber that they had at Ultimate Luchadors, the teacher versus the student, it just was absolutely sublime. One of the best matches I think Rey Mysterio has done outside of WWE. I remember his matches on Pentagon Dark, I believe was season 3, episode 1, if I'm not mistaken. That match is an absolute belt as well, one I would highly recommend. Outside of WWE and not Lucha Underground as well, I'm going to be honest, I haven't really seen much of his work with New Japan Pro Wrestling, although I have seen him face Jushin Thunder Liger before in WCW at Starrcade. I thought that was a great match. I believe that may have been 1996. WCW is where there's a lot of great, Rey Mysterio matches, I would say, outside of WWE. His match against Psychosis, one of the greatest openers of all time to a pay-per-view, that took place at Bash at the Beach 1996. Of course, the show was famously with the start of the NWO and the Hulk Hogan heel turn. As well as that, his month before against Dean Malenko at the Great American Bash was absolutely sublime as well. And I'd also suggest the three-way dance at Starrcade 1998, Mysterio taking on Juventud Guerrera and Billy Kidman. It was an absolute belter of a match. Now, I haven't been asked about best WWE matches, so I thought I'd throw a few of those into this as well. You cannot forget the Royal Rumble 2006, the dedication to Eddie Guerrero, where, Mysterio came in at entry number 2, went the entire distance to go and win the Royal Rumble. Still, arguably seen as one of the best Rumble matches of all time. In fact, I'd recommend you go and check out my greatest Royal Rumble matches of all time video, according to Wrestling YouTube earlier this year. It's definitely a heavy favourite in that. Of course, that led on then to WrestleMania 22, Rey Mysterio winning the World Championship against Randy Orton Orton and Kurt Angle in what I thought was a very good triple threat match despite not having a long time at WrestleMania 22. At the Bash 2009, the feud with Chris Jericho at the time with the Mask versus Intercontinental Championship match I thought was very well done with those two superstars. The Elimination Chamber match earlier that year, of course, 2009, where Mysterio and Edge were the last two combatants in the ring. That's a phenomenal match. And of course, No Mercy 2002, the tag team match, Edge and Rey Mysterio going against Kurt Angle and Chris Benoit. Absolutely sublime. We talk about openers as well. Rey Mysterio against Kurt Angle, the first pay-per-view match for Rey Mysterio in WWE at SummerSlam 2002. There were so many great Rey Mysterio matches in his catalogue, so many matches that I'd recommend people to go and check out if they haven't seen them. Anthony New with our next question now here on AskSCW. What do you think are Rey Mysterio's top 5 rivals of all time? So many great ones. Obviously, we have to go Eddie Guerrero to begin off with there. We talked about his best match of all time at Halloween Havoc 1997. Then we had some great matches over the years, even in WWE as well. Let's not forget the Dominik Mysterio sort of custody match with the ladder match at 2005 SummerSlam. Of course, that was a great rivalry at the time, even though it would probably seem bonkers today. Psychosis seemed to be a rival Mysterio wherever he went, whether it was in Mexico, ECW, WCW. So for me, he has to be a shout as well. They had some matches in WWE. Who remembers Psychosis as part of the Mexicals back in the day as well. I really enjoyed the rivalry of Dave Bautista. Of course, when You Were Supposed to Be My Friend. One of the really well done heel turns when they did that with Dave Bautista at Bragging Rights in 2009. Rey Mysterio was absolutely dominated, but it was just done such in a good way. I think it has to go in the top rivalries for me. JBL being another one as well. Of course, Rey Mysterio ended up retiring JBL in the end at WrestleMania. Of course, that was a fun 25-second match in the end, if I'm not mistaken, and JBL never letting it go on commentary. And I mentioned it earlier with some of Rey's greatest WWE matches, Chris Jericho, just the one that was playing out in 2009. The fact that one match, I believe, was Extreme Rules, Rey Mysterio lost because the mask was taken off and Chris Jericho took advantage for it. Then go to the Bash when we had the Mask versus IC title match. I think it's really well done. Great storytelling over a number of weeks. Certainly a rivalry I could go back and watch again and again. That for me has to be in the top 5 of Rey Mysterio rivalries of all time. Next question comes from Martin Lorenzo Carrillo. Out of the 3 world title reigns Rey Mysterio had in 2006, 2010 and 2011, you wish lasted longer, and which one would you select where it would have been better in your opinion for him to drop the championship? To be honest, I would argue all of them could have lasted longer. Rey Mysterio, over 3 championship reigns, has only held that championship for 140 days in total. Of course, the first time he was World Heavyweight Champion, of course, back in 2006, he was kind of booked as a bit of a jobber at that point. It kind of felt like a relief when the championship was taken off of him. That was probably one of the sour points. I would have actually preferred, rather than that length being longer, I think it would have been better if he was just booked stronger. He seemed to lose almost every single match at that time. Maybe got through 1 or 2 championship matches when he got to pay-per-view, but then it changed once again when he got back to weekly TV. His reign in 2010 was only 28 days, but of course he was cashed in on with Money in the Bank with Kane. And of course that third time he actually won a tournament on Monday Night Raw, of course when CM Punk had left the company, only to then lose that championship to John Cena seconds later. So for me personally, I would say that of all of them, yeah, 2011 I suppose has to be the one you wish would be longer. 2006 perhaps be the one that would be shorter because of the way that they kept making him lose in general. But for me, if it was my personal choice, I think all of them would be slightly longer reigns and perhaps better book reigns. You know, Rey Mysterio, in my opinion, probably never had a strong run as world champion in WWE at any point. Next question comes from George B from What You Call It podcast. Who should turn heel, Rey Mysterio or Dominik Mysterio? Really fun, topical question, this one. Many have been speculating that Dominik will eventually turn on Rey Mysterio, some even suggesting it will happen at Madison Square Garden on the 20-year celebration on Monday Night Raw. We'll have to wait and see if that will happen. Of course, we've got the Mysterios currently feuding with the Judgment Day, Edge rumoured to return as well. Perhaps maybe we could get a Dom heel turn and then we get Edge return and we get that sort of reunion tag team from 20 years ago, Edge and Rey Mysterio going against the Judgment Day at SummerSlam or even Clash at the Castle. But for me, there's many different ways it could go. We've seen over the years Rey Mysterio getting a bit upset, if you want, with Dominik not taking pointers on board, perhaps not improving to the level. So we've seen the argument from both sides of where one or the other could turn heel. I think though the favoured, more likely one would be Dominik Mysterio to turn heel. Rey isn't really comfortable in the heel dynamic in my opinion. Perhaps maybe we've not seen it play out with the right storyline, the right narrative. Maybe that could be where it would change. But at the same time, for me, I think Dominik Mysterio would be the one that would make most sense, because Dominik should be the one to eventually retire Rey Mysterio, in my personal opinion. Do it at a WrestleMania, do it for the mask as well, where not only can he sort of, get Rey to remove his mask for a second time in his career, but actually could then take the mask and wear it himself and actually become the King Mysterio going forward. Perhaps even getting the Rey name going forward as well. Rey Mysterio the Third. I don't know how it would necessarily work. Of course, current Rey Mysterio was Rey Mysterio Jr., so I don't know how they would make it work in that way, but they certainly can have it where Dominik gets the mask and actually, at that point, gets away from Rey Mysterio and can go on to do his own thing. But for me personally, I wouldn't have it in the Judgment Day. That's just my personal preference. I don't think Dominik fits the group, but certainly I do think this is a match that will definitely happen one day. It's a matter of when, not if, and for me, I would pick Dominik as the one who would turn heel. Speaking of Rey Mysterio without the mask, above the ring of our next question now. After I spent without the mask at the tail end of WCW, how did it feel to see Rey Mysterio with the mask back on when he first signed with WWE? When it comes to Rey Mysterio's mask, it doesn't matter if you're a long-term fan, someone that's a casual, or someone who's just seen 1 or 2 wrestling shows. If you know something to do with wrestling and you see the Rey Mysterio mask, you know that mask. You can recognize that out of all luchador masks that you've seen through the different, many thousands of wrestlers in different promotions throughout the years. Rey Mysterio is one of the GOATs when it comes to luchador wrestling. It goes to show why he was the cover star of WWE 2K22. He is a household name. And when you come to Rey Mysterio, when it got to that period of WCW where they removed the mask from him, when he lost to Kevin Nash, I believe was at Super Brawl 1999. For me, it just seemed a bit weird for me. And of course, they did originally present him then as someone that was a giant killer, someone that can actually beat the giants in the ring. He did actually win a match against Kevin Nash. He beat the likes of, Bam Bam Bigelow and people like that of a big size. But after a while, Rey Mysterio just became another member of the roster. Even though they gave him a big push throughout the summer of 1999, was seen as one of the biggest stars that was sort of breaking through. He did kind of fade away when he sort of become a pack of the filthy animals. He got injured, of course, a couple of times as well around that period. So Rey Mysterio's stock without the mask really fell dramatically. And like I say, where it's one of the big selling points of Rey Mysterio, just to become another guy without it. For WWE to come and sign him and bring him in 2002, it only made sense to bring him in with that mask. He stood out, he was a unique character, he could be pushed as one of the top stars in WWE, and it just goes to show from a marketing standpoint the fact that we still see Rey Mysterio 20 years to the day, still competing in WWE, one of the most special stars in WWE as well. So many people were actually debuting in 2002, yet him, John Cena, and Randy Orton are the ones that got the celebrations. We've not seen it for Dave Bautista. We didn't even see it for Brock Lesnar. Arguably still a bigger star at this particular point, but Rey Mysterio is getting that celebration this Monday Night Raw. It goes on to show that a class of his own there, that he's seen as one of the elite wrestlers, and why it's important that he kept the mask and brought it back when he joined WWE. Next question comes from Jamie Holmes. Could Rey Mysterio have worked as a heel? If so, when do you think would have been the right time to initiate the turn? And of course, Underground Temple also asking the same question. Now, believe it or not, there was actually one small short period in Rey Mysterio's career where he has been a heel. It was a part of the Filthy Animals faction in WCW back in late 1999 when Vince Russo first took over the pencil. In the first couple of weeks, Ric Flair was beaten down by the Filthy Animals and written off TV, where they stole his wallet, his watches, his jewellery, everything that was to do with Ric Flair with his Armani suits and stuff like that. The Filthy Animals literally rinsed him dry. And Rey Mysterio was actually a heel for a number of weeks as well, when Tori Wilson had just joined their group as well. She was meant to be dating Billy Kidman and sort of turned on David Flair, Ric Flair's son, at that time period as well. So that was a very awkward period. It didn't really kind of fit. It didn't sort of feel the narrative as well. They've been so over as baby faces, all of them, apart from Eddie Guerrero, just turned babyface at the time of Filthy Animals through the summer of 1999. So for them to turn heel at that point was a very weird move, and it didn't last very long. They went to be in a heel versus heel rivalry against the Revolution at the time, which was Perry Saturn, Dean Malenko, and Shane Douglas. Of course, they did have Chris Benoit in that group. He continued as a babyface and gone solo, leaving the group as well. So it was a bit of a weird dynamic, and it sort of felt that the more babyfaces of this heel versus heel group was the Filthy Animals, and then after the point when Rey got injured, he would come back and he'd be a babyface again. So thankfully, Rey Mysterio's tenure as a heel in WWE wasn't too long. As for WWE though, I mean, that could be what you were actually initiating with your question. He's never been heel in WWE. When could be the right time to do it? We got asked the question in a run about Rey versus Dom. There is perhaps arguments you could say that Rey Mysterio could be one that could have or should turn heel in that situation. Could be something different. The fact that Dominik's not good enough in Rey's eyes, a disappointment. You could play that storyline out. But I'm not sure it fits the character that is Rey Mysterio. But when could have been a good time otherwise that you could have done it? We talked about his world title reigns. How about the fact it didn't quite work out in 2006? He then went on to have a rivalry with Chavo Guerrero, of course, at that point, where he then got injured and was off TV for nearly a good year at that point. So maybe it perhaps wouldn't have lined in the stars with him getting injured as well at that point. But perhaps after he lost the world title in 2006, the fact that things didn't quite work out, the stock had gone down after doing it for Eddie Guerrero. Of course, fans were well on side. It felt like that sort of that popularity had sort of just faded off a little bit. It could have been the right time to initiate a heel turn. Would have been interesting how it would have played out. Maybe he could have aligned alongside Chavo Guerrero. Who knows how it could have played out? It could have been very interesting. Maybe Chavo could have been the one that could have been the babyface. Maybe Rey Mysterio was aligned with Vicky Guerrero. Who knows how it could have played out? But would have been something different. Could have been something interesting. But for me, from what I have seen of the brief time of Rey Mysterio as a heel, I don't think it connected the same way. He's just one of those best natural babyfaces you've ever seen, and someone that I think, just he plays that babyface role so well. To see him doing anything different just feels a bit weird. Last question this week coming from Mike. Italian Habs Mike. What if instead of LWO, Rey joined the NWO? Rey feeling disrespected by WCW and attacked Sting. Even more shocking, Rey unmasking himself when joining NWO. How would that have worked out? Some great fantasy booking fun in that questionnaire. I really like that. And it's all taking some of the ingredients out there of Rey Mysterio's time in WCW and putting into one area there, joining NWO, instead of actually giving up the mask because of the fact he lost to NWO, doing it as a signal of I will join the NWO, the fact that he turns his back on WCW, the idea of course that when it comes to LWO, he didn't want to join them to begin with, he was forced to join them, and then when the group disbanded because Eddie Guerrero was injured, he then was fighting on behalf of them. It felt very strange. He wanted nothing to do with the group a few weeks earlier, but they just sort of flipped the script and went, well, all the others are sort of just given up because NWO is back together, and they said they were going to beat them up week after week. Rey Mysterio all of a sudden wanted to stand up for the LWO name. It didn't really make any sense at that particular time period. So I kind of like your fantasy booking idea more, because Rey Mysterio, like we said later in the year, experimented with the heel run. Didn't quite work out with the Filthy Animals, but could it work with the NWO? It certainly could have done. I mean, they had Conan in the group as well, so it was always a mentor to Rey Mysterio as well. Of course, at that point, Conan had been kicked out of the group as well, was going for that singles run as well, because he was part of the Wolfpack, which was the babyface part of the group. Maybe we could have had a good rivalry of him and Conan, Rey Mysterio being the heel at that point. I think that storyline could have had some more storyline narrative, would have made a lot more sense. The fact as well, maybe that the beatdown via the LWO could have happened because of the NWO and Rey Mysterio joined them as well. Maybe it could have been someone like Conan who stuck up for LWO in the meantime, and that could have made a bit more of a fighting chance for that rivalry to actually mean something in the short term. But of course, if we go back to WCW, LWO didn't mean anything. It was a group that lasted for a couple of months. So when we look back now with rose-tinted glasses, how cool was LWO back in the day? It was really cool, but it didn't last for very long, and they didn't end up doing very much. So at the same time, I guess it wasn't to be. It was never taken so seriously from the head creative side of WCW. But Rey Mysterio and NWO would have been interesting. Even with the mask, I think could have been an interesting way. Just purely wearing black and white as part of the mask, or black and red if it was Wolfpack. I think certainly could have been a very marketable way to promote Rey Mysterio back in the day. Of course, we're potentially attacking Sting at some point. Of course, Sting was injured between Halloween Havoc 1998 and I think returned for Spring Stampede 1999. So if you had a Sting versus Rey Mysterio rivalry at that point, I think that could have been a lot of fun. That could have been interesting to see how that would have played out. The mysterious Mysterio against Sting. Obviously, we had the rivalry with Sting and Vampiro that took place in 2000 as well. So I think it could have been a fun way and a dynamic how they could have made that rivalry work. I certainly think it would be interesting. As for fantasy booking fun, I suppose you could have used the idea of Sting going to NWO, turning his back on WCW, but doing it with the Wolfpack. And not doing it properly. If you're going to turn your back on WCW, at least be good enough. Maybe Sting wasn't good enough as part of NWO. He got himself injured, he got himself hurt. Bret Hart took him out in the end, where he was out of action for 6 months. And Rey Mysterio and be, look, this is not how you're going to, if you want to be a bad guy, this is how you do it. Get the backup as well of the NWO to have that in that sort of rivalry as well. I think it could be quite interesting fun, and just seeing the idea perhaps if with Rey was with or without the mask as well. You know, this is the real me if he's without the mask, where Sting hides behind the face paint. We don't see what the real Sting is. And of course, when he was part of the NWO Wolfpack, you still wasn't seeing the real, so you didn't know whether to trust WCW anymore, whether WCW should still trust him now. There's a lot of different ways they could go with it. It certainly would be fun to see how it would have played out. But sadly, it wasn't meant to be, and sadly, that is the end of the Q&A today. Certainly a lot of great questions there talking about Rey Mysterio throughout his entire career, not just his 20 years in WWE. Gotta say, I've been a big fan watching his work over the many, many years that I've been watching him. Since first time I saw him, I think was a WCW Nitro episode, him against Ultimo Dragon, when Rey Mysterio won the championship from him. I believe it was a 1996 edition. And instantly, just seeing his style at that time, he was well ahead of his time, the way he could flip and do things in the ring. He still, as you can see, fits so well with the current crop of superstars that we see today in modern professional wrestling. I'd like to know some of your favourite Rey Mysterio moments in the comments below. I'd like to know your viewpoints on any of the questions that have been spoken about today. Maybe your favourite matches, favourite rivals, about heel turn as well. How would you book the fantasy booking with him in NWO? I'd like to know your thoughts in the comments below right now. If you've enjoyed this video, then please do like it, share with a friend, and subscribe as well. AskSCW is going to probably take a bit of a break for the next few weeks. I'm going to be honest with you, just the way life is at the moment, I think that it'd be better for me to do more live Q&As at this particular moment. So I think expect to see me doing more live Q&As on the channel for the time being, whether it's, you know, SummerSlam predictions, which are coming up this week on Tuesday, but also just live streams in general. I think will be easier for me to do right now. So keep an eye out for those on the channel over the next number of weeks. But AskSCW will return soon, so don't you fret. And of course, the questions can always go on Twitter, always on Instagram, always on Facebook as well. And of course, they can always be dropped in the comment section here on YouTube. Also, I'm happy to discuss professional wrestling with you, whether it's Rey Mysterio, any topic, any promotion, get yourselves involved. But in the meantime, check out these other videos on the side of your screen right now. I've got a great one for you, including Vince McMahon retiring, what that can mean for WWE going forward, as well as joined by NXT for that, and also what is the greatest SummerSlam of all time according to Wrestling YouTube. A lot of fun, 21 YouTube channels involved in one video to decide the greatest SummerSlam of all time. Check those videos out right now. Have yourselves a great day. You've been watching SCW here on YouTube. Thank you for watching and have a great day.